find that they're very stuck. Let's say when they go into flexion, they get really stuck here, and then it opens up as I bring them more into abduction and external rotation. Then I know that for this particular patient, they are going to squat much more effectively in a wider stance with more external rotation. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to squat. The squat is one of the best exercises that you can perform, and it is an exercise that we do on a daily basis. Every single time you go to sit down into a chair or stand up from that chair, you are squatting. Every single time you have to sit down to drop a deuce, you are squatting. Every single time that you have to step into your car, you are essentially doing a pistol squat with a lateral shift. But the one problem with the squat is that a lot of people end up doing it incorrectly, and that is because they end up watching a lot of powerlifters, and the squat often gets taught as a powerlifting version of the exercise. There are two different ways that you can perform a squat. One is going to be for functionality, and then the second way is going to be the powerlifting style, which is the one that gets taught most often. If you are just trying to improve your body's function and feel better, you would want to perform the squat as a functional movement, whereas if it is your main objective to lift the most amount of weight possible, then you would want to perform the powerlifting variation of the squat. The problem is that most personal trainers only know the powerlifting version, and that is the way that they teach all of their single clients. And another problem is that it only gets taught one way. Depending on your genetics and your bone structure, how you perform the squat is going to be different on an individual to individual basis. Just as one example, the difference between men and women with the pelvis. Generally speaking, women are going to have a wider pelvis and is going to be much shorter, whereas men are going to have a more narrow and taller pelvis. And because of that, foot position is going to vary between men and women. This is just a generalization, but generally, women are going to be able to perform the squat much more effectively with a wider stance and with the feet more externally rotated. Whereas with men, generally men are going to be able to perform the squat much more effectively if they have more of a narrow stance, such as the typical shoulder width apart stance, and with their feet a little bit more neutral or just slightly externally rotated. That's just a couple of the differences, but I'm going to get into the squat and how exactly to set up for it and perform the movement. And with the squat, I'm going to start from the ground up, since the ground is where you generate all your force. But anyway, let's go ahead and get on with the demonstration. Okay, so now for the very first part of the squat, the first thing that we want to do is set up the foot position, because foot position is going to be the most important. That is going to be where you generate all of your power. When it comes to setting up the foot position, I am going to show you 5 different methods that I use with my patients, and they're all pretty straightforward. Method number 1, I call it the jump squat method. What you're going to do for this is you are going to do 3 jumping squats. On the 3rd jumping squat, you are going to sit down into that deep position. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and hold it. That's going to be the position that you hold. Look at your feet, stand up. That is going to be your foot position when you are squatting. This is going to be the best way. This, if you have a patient that feels very comfortable when they jump and go down into a deep squat, you could use this one. Not everyone is going to be able to jump and go right into a deep squat. For that one, then just doing the jump and stick method, which is method number 2, as I like to call it, this is going to be the next best method. What you're going to do for this one, you're going to jump up, stick the landing. Wherever your feet are, that is going to be your foot position. One thing worth noting with this one is, if you have never done this method with somebody, a lot of times, the very first time that they jump, they might have a little weird foot position. So just ask the patient, say, does that feel comfortable? Do you feel like you could go all the way down without really having any issues with impingement in the hips, anything like that? If they feel very comfortable, then it's probably good. But if you're looking at the foot position and it looks a little weird, have them do that another 2 or 3 more times. If you notice that every single time they jump that their foot position is off, then go to the next method, because this one probably just is not right for them. Which brings us to method number 3. This is the method that I like to call dropping a deuce. And the reason I call it that is because the way I teach this particular method, ask your patient to imagine that they are in the woods and that they have to drop a deuce in the middle of the woods. Tell them to get down into a position and find a position that feels really comfortable for them. So ask them to kind of just move around, go in a narrow position, go a little bit wider, go even wider, and ask them, do you feel like you are clenching your butt, or do you feel nice and relaxed? If you were to drop a deuce in the middle of the woods, would it come out nice and easily? Would you be able to pass it without any issue? Or would you be letting go of spaghetti when it comes out the back end? If they are clenching to the point where they are going to drop out a bunch of spaghetti, then that foot position is not optimal. They want to find a foot position where they can actually do the squat without having any type of clenching in their butts. That is method 3, which is the dropping a deuce position. Now I'm going to teach you 2 more methods. These ones involve the massage therapy table, and they are going to be much more effective if you have a patient who has some type of pathology. Either some dysfunction in their hip, their knee, their lumbar spine, any type of pathology that does not allow them to get down into a deep squat. But let's go ahead and teach you those 2 methods right now. All right now I'm joined by my good friend, Johnny Bones, aka Boner, and right now Boner is going to help me to demonstrate 2 more methods for determining foot position. The 3 methods that I showed you just now, those are going to be ideal if you have an average person with no type of severe postural dysfunction or no issues with regard to something like pelvis dysfunction, hip dysfunction, knee dysfunction, anything like that. However, if you are somebody that has any of those conditions, if you do have some type of dysfunction in your hip, knee, lumbar spine, or severe postural dysfunction, then jumping may not be the best way to determine your foot position. So I'm going to show you 2 more ways. One of the ways that I'm going to show you is going to be the way that you can use completely by yourself. You don't need anybody. And then the second way, if you are a physiotherapist or any type of manual therapist and you are trying to teach somebody with a dysfunctional biomechanics how exactly to squat, then this method is going to be for you. The first one that I'm going to teach you though, you can do completely by yourself. Boner, just get out of the way for a second. For this one right over here, what you want to do is lie down on your back on the table. Once you are on the table, what you want to do is tuck your knees toward your chest and find where exactly you can get deepest and kind of play around with the angle. Go in, go out. Wherever you find that you have the most freedom, you have no impingement in your hip or anything like that, what you want to do, take a look down at your feet, memorize that position. That is going to be your foot position. Once you actually get onto the ground, try to mimic that. Now, the next, let's say that you are a manual therapist and you are trying to teach a patient how to squat who has never squatted before, or if you have somebody who is very uncomfortable when it comes to jumping or getting down into a very deep squat position. Well, for that type of a patient, then this way is going to be optimal for them. I'm just going to grab Boner and put Boner on the table. This is how I teach my physiotherapy patients and my fascial stretch therapy patients, the ones that have a lot of dysfunction and are unable to get into that deep squat position, either because they're hesitant, because they are afraid, thinking they're going to hurt themselves, or just they physically cannot get into that position. What I will do with those patients, I will get them on the massage table, and then from here, what I want to do is take their hip, and I'm going to play around with the different ranges of motion. If I find that they're very stuck, let's say when they go into flexion, they get really stuck here, and then it opens up as I bring them more into abduction and external rotation, then I know that for this particular patient, they are going to squat much more effectively in a wider stance with more external rotation. So what I'm going to do is find exactly where they're the most free, and Boner is pretty free right over here, so that's going to be a good position for his right leg. Once I found a good position, I'm going to have the patient hold on to their limb while I go and do the same thing with the other limb. Once I figure out that, next step, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to play around with the angle up. He's really stuck over here. Let's go a little bit into abduction, external rotation. Wow, Boner is completely free right over here. I'm going to do the same thing, have him hold on to both legs. Then, gonna take a look, I'm gonna get to the bottom of the table. Wherever both of the feet are, I am going to memorize that position, and that is going to be the position that I am going to have them set up when they perform their squat. Now that we've determined the proper foot position, next we want to determine the proper everything else. We are gonna go step by step, down from the ground and up. So we're gonna go into knee position, hip, spinal position, shoulders, cervical spine, all that type of stuff. But anyway, let's go ahead and get on with the rest of the demonstration. And now that we have the proper foot position, the next thing that we need to do is everything else. So next we are going to move to the ankles. With the ankles, if they have pronated feet, you notice they have collapsed arches. What you want to cue is you want to push the ankles to the outside. You don't want excessive arches, but you don't want a flat foot either. Another way that you could cue this is just have them lift all of the big toes. Just lift all the toes straight up to the sky, and then that will allow them to supinate their foot a little bit more. Once they have that position, just tell them to memorize how their arch feels, and then they can put their toes down. You could also have them squat with their toes up. This would be good for functional squat, not so much for powerlifting, but that's pretty much it for the ankle position. Next is going to be the knees. With regard to the knees, this is something that often gets taught as a powerlifting style. Again, you have powerlifting variations and you have functional variations. If you are teaching the squat as a functional variation, this part right over here, regardless of whether you are teaching it as a functional squat or powerlifting, the knee position should never go inside of the knees. So what you want to do is, if you were to draw a line down the center of your patella, which is your kneecap, and the center of your second toe, your knees should not go inside of your second toe. They should remain over or outside of your second toe. That's the first thing. This is going to be where there's a little bit of a difference between the functional squat and the powerlifting squat. For the functional squat, you want your knees to go past your toes to get more activation of your quadriceps. When your knees go past your toes, the more past your toes they go, the more activation of the quadricep muscles you are going to get. Whereas when you keep them behind your toes, you're going to get more hamstring and glute activation. Your quadriceps are a slow twitch muscle group, which means they are not really meant for power and strength. Whereas your glutes and hamstrings, they are fast twitch muscle groups. They are designed for explosiveness, for strength, for power. So if you are trying to lift as much weight as possible, you would want to keep your knees behind your toes so you can use more glutes, more hamstrings, and generate a lot more force. But if you're teaching it as a functional squat, you want to drive the knees as far past your toes as possible. That way we can end up getting a little bit more ankle mobility, because when you hinge back from the hips, you're not going to get as much ankle mobility as when you drive the knees forward. That's for the functional squat. For the powerlifting variation, it's the opposite. We don't want the knees to go past the toes because we want more glute and hamstring activation so we can generate more power. So for the functional squat, we're driving the knees forward and we are bringing the knees outside of the second toe. For the powerlifting variation, what we want to do is we are doing more of a hip hinge to get into the squat. So we are hinging backward and we are trying to keep the toes, or the knees behind the toes. That is the two different variations when it comes to knee position. Next, we want to do hip position. For hip position, if we are doing a functional squat, we want retroversion of the hip. Retroversion, you can think of it as posterior pelvic tilt. The two terms are basically synonymous. And what that means is you want to tuck your pelvis underneath you. So imagine that the pelvis in the front, you want to bring your ASIS, which is these two bony landmarks over here, you want to try and bring them toward your chin. That's going to be the first thing. Next is the thoracic spine. We want the thoracic spine to be parallel or higher to our shin. So when we go down in a functional squat, we don't want our back like this. We want to tuck the pelvis underneath us, so we're going into retroversion. And then with the upper spine, the thoracic spine should remain parallel or higher to your shins throughout the movement. You don't want it to go where it collapses forward. You want to try and keep it parallel or higher. Whereas with the powerlifting variation, the pelvis, we just want it in a neutral position. We're not going into anteversion, we are not going into retroversion, just a neutral position. And then over here, we are hinging back, and the spine, if it goes below parallel, it's not really too much of an issue for the powerlifting variation. Next, we want to take a look at the shoulders and elbows. With regard to the elbows, we want to tuck the elbows underneath the bar. By tucking the elbows underneath the bar, this is going to help to stabilize our scapula. Next, hand position, we want to bring the hands as close as possible to our body. This is going to be ideal for the functional squat. For powerlifting, you could keep the hands a little bit farther out. Next, what we want to do, if you are doing a functional squat, you want to push up on the bar. If you are doing a powerlifting squat, you want to pull down on the bar. By pulling down on the bar, you're going to activate more of your latissimus dorsi muscle, and that's going to create more tension on the posterior chain. You're going to get more tension on the lats, thoracolumbar fascia, glutes, and all those different areas. So pull down on the bar for powerlifting squat. For a functional squat, you are pushing up on the bar. Next, we want to look at the cervical spine. For the cervical spine, with the functional squat, we want to keep the chin tucked in and maintain a neutral spine. So when you are going down, the entire time, your chin should be tucked in and your spine in a neutral position. Whereas with the powerlifting squat, once you get to the bottom, you kind of want to look up, because by looking up, your body is going to move in that direction. And if you're lifting a ton of weight, you're going to want all the help you can get. So for functional squat, chin tucked in, neutral spine. For powerlifting, you want your eyes to follow where you are moving with the lift. And then lastly, we are going to take a look at the mouth and breathing mechanics. The mouth is something that often gets overlooked. With the powerlifting variation, this isn't really important, but if you are squatting for function, it's going to be very important. What you want to do is you want to activate the buccopharyngeal fascia. The buccopharyngeal fascia is going to be really important to help stabilize all of the muscles located inside of your skull and also in your upper diaphragm area, your neck, and all the cervical muscles. What you want to do is you are going to swallow, and when you swallow, the tongue should be stuck against the upper part of your mouth, so the roof of your mouth. So if you've ever done the type thing, right before you make that clicking noise, that is how your tongue should be placed inside of your mouth. That is the mouth mechanics. Next, the breathing mechanics. For the functional squat, when it comes to the breathing, we are going to inhale for the bottom 3/4. So inhale, inhale, inhale. Then we are going to hold our breath for the bottom quarter, hold our breath for the upper half, and then we are going to exhale on the last half of the ascent. So we are inhaling for the bottom 3/4. We are holding our breath for the last quarter, holding our breath for the upper half, and then exhaling for the last half. When it comes to the powerlifting variation, what we want to do is inhale, hold our breath until we get to the bottom, and then exhale as we explode up. So inhale, hold the breath, and then exhale as we explode up. Those are basically the two different variations of the different squat. We have the powerlifting variation and the functional variation. So depending on whether you are training the squat for functionality or to lift the most amount of weight possible, those are some of the differences between the two different variations and how exactly you should perform the squat. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.